It was late December, and it was cold. The kind of cold that makes metal shutters ring when the wind cuts through the shotengai. After closing up after work, I took the side street behind the arcade to reach the station faster. Stores were down to skeleton light, just the emergency bulbs over back doors and a sign humming where someone forgot to pull the plug. Halfway along the alley, the smell arrived before anything else. Not garbage, not sewage. Rot, with a sweet, fatty edge that stuck in the throat. I tried to breathe through my mouth and that didn't help. It carried, like it had weight. Something moved at the far end where the alley meets the shrine lane. My headlamp picked up the corner of a vending machine, a stack of crates, and a shape that didn't match earlier. At first I thought it was a person curled up under a coat, so I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" Because I knew that I wouldn't feel good with myself if I was to walk past someone who might be in trouble in this kind of cold. But there was no answer. The shape then stood, but not like a person. It gathered itself. The outline didn't arrange into head, shoulders, legs. It was just one mass, round at the top and wider to the ground, with folds that made a suggestion of a face where a chest would be. No eyes that I could pick out. A lamp threw a weak shine across wrinkled skin. Not bare, not clothed, just surface. Soft looking and wrong, as if it had been poured out and allowed to set. It took a step. I heard it as much as I saw it. A wet shift, a weight settling, then another step. The smell reached me good and solid. I clamped my teeth together to keep the contents of my stomach where they were. I told myself it could still be a person, with a heavy blanket or some kind of padded suit, or an injury that made them move that way. I said out loud, "I'm gonna call for help," and reached my phone. The shape stopped. Not like it was startled, like stopping was part of its rhythm, the way you'd stop at the mouth of a road to check for cars. Only there was nothing to check. It turned slightly, and the fold where the face might be swiveled without a neck. A cat streaked in from the lane and shot past my ankles, claws scraping the concrete. The thing didn't even react. It resumed, 2 lazy steps, a pause, 2 more. The path it chose was the center of the alley, where my headlamp was the strongest, like it preferred a clean run. I kept my voice steady and asked it again if it needed any help. In my head, it was an it at that point. The wind pushed the smell against me. My eyes watered. The thing passed on an old poster board. Its edge brushed the plywood and left a dark smear the size of a handprint. No tearing, no snag. The surface gave and then pulled back into itself. At the junction with the shrine lane, it stopped again. The small torii at the alley mouth was ahead on the right. Someone had tied a fresh shimenawa with white paper strips for New Year's. There were usually a couple of salarymen smoking there after the last train, but tonight it was empty. And for a second I thought it would turn towards the torii, but instead it angled left away from the shrine and slid along the curb to the park. Its steps had no hurry. I followed at 2 arms' length, keeping the lamp low so the splash wouldn't blind me. Close up, the texture was clear, thick folds, some smooth, some pleated, with no sense of a seam or clothing, no hair. Where a hand should have been, there was bulk. Where a foot should have been, there was weight and contact, but no heel, no toes. The face was the trick of the folds, a dip for a mouth, a shadow where the eye could be, when the light hit it right, and then gone when it moved. Every few steps the smell would lift, as if the wind had tore it off and then dropped it back in. At the park gate it paused again. A bicycle lay against the fence, rear wheels spinning, someone left in a hurry. The thing ignored it. It crossed the path and stopped by the public restroom wall, as if checking the corner for an exit only it understood. The lamp made the tiles shine, then dull, then shine again as it went by. It left another smear on the wall at knee height, like grease from a machine, but darker, with a meaty kind of shine to it. I didn't see a face, not once. I wanted to. Your brain keeps looking for eyes to negotiate with, but each time the light found the front, folds arranged into almost, and then it moved, and the almost went flat. The park empties into a wider road that runs down to the river. The traffic there, late, is mostly taxis and small trucks. It reached the edge, where the pavement drops an inch into the asphalt, and made a longer step. A heave that shifted fold over fold, and dropped onto the road with a sound like a wet bag. No cars came. It went straight across. 2 steps, stop, 2 steps, and disappeared onto the river path, a darker shape becoming part of the general dark. I stood by that restroom, with the smell still around me, and called the emergency services. But I didn't know what to say. All I could muster was, "Someone in trouble. Big, moving strangely, might be ill, smells really bad." The operator said that a patrol car would pass by. I waited until the engine noise came and went. Nobody stopped. I took photos of the smear with my phone, and then I tried to wipe it with the edge of a tissue. It came away, brown-black, oily, and the tissue tore, and the smell on my fingers made my throat jump. I scrubbed my hands at the drinking fountain until they were numb. The next morning there was still a mark on the board and a scuff on the tiles. Someone had hosed the path. The trail it left had feathered into the gravel like grease spilling into broth. I took a better photo in the daylight and showed it to the shrine caretaker. He didn't ask many questions, he just said, "Year-end brings out old things," in a voice that was void of sarcasm and skepticism. He pointed to the torii. "Keep to the middle lane at night, and don't touch anything that looks like it can stain you." I told a friend at work, and he sent me over a page of results, pictures from old yokai scrolls, notes about one-body blobs that wander towns at night that smell like rot and don't really attack. One entry said that people used to whisper that eating a piece of one kept you young. The friend added, "Don't try that." And I said thanks, and I tried to move away from the conversation. 2 nights later, on the way home, a cleaning van was parked in the alley. The board had been scrubbed, and the restroom wall had a clean rectangle where the mark used to be. The smell was gone. I walked the same route for a week. Nothing. The only part left was a small phantom trace that came back when I passed the lane, like a memory designed for the nose. If I stood at the torii and looked towards the park, I could almost picture the 2-step stop rhythm crossing the asphalt. The mind tries to turn things into people, but I wasn't sure this had ever been one. I keep to the center of the lane now, following the shrine caretaker's advice, and I don't lean on walls. And if I ever smell that smell again, I'll go the long way round. But that thing didn't chase me, and it didn't want anything that I could give it. It moved through the city like it had a place to be, and no hurry to get there. That was the worst part, just how ordinary it made the street feel while I was in it, and how it left you wondering what else walks the night that we don't have the right eyes to see. Hi, Jay here. That lump of flesh isn't internet lore. It's in the Edo picture scrolls. You can spot it in Sawaki Sushi's YOKAI Zukan from 1737, and then again in Toriyama Sekien's Gazu Hyakkai Yagyo in 1776. They talk about this human-sized wrinkled mass that wanders at night, stinks to high heaven, and mostly ignores you. People called it Nuppepo, a featureless fold of flesh, putrid, fatty odor, more passerby than predator, plus That old longevity rumor that eating a piece will make you youthful. That's a strange thing. Don't try that. Also, it turns up in Gegege no Kitaro. There's even a 2019 episode riffing on an anti-aging cream, geriatric Nuppepo. And in Yokai Watch, under the localized name Blob Goblin, I'll leave a link in the description if you want to have a look at what this thing looks like a bit more. On the shore of Lake Kusharo in Hokkaido, here people have reported an unconfirmed giant creature known as Kussie. The name pays homage to Nessie from Scotland's Loch Ness. Besides eyewitness accounts, there are photographs of ripples on the lake's surface, but the true identity remains unknown. On this beautiful caldera lake, stories with a high sense of mystery have long circulated, and the local legend has become one of the reasons why tourists come to visit. Among Japan's unconfirmed giant aquatic creatures, Kussie is almost as famous as Ishi of Lake Ikeda. However, since the 2000s, sightings have been rare to almost non-existent. Before the lake's pH shifted markedly towards acidity, a change linked to earthquake activity, fish were abundant here. People said a large ito or sakalin taimen, a species of salmon around 2 meters long, swam that lake. From that, some have argued that Kussie's true form might simply be a very large taimen. Those who deny Kussie's existence often point to insufficient food resources, such as foraging fish, to support a large creature. Even though trout were stocked there in modern times, they say that the lake still isn't a suitable environment for a large animal. And yet there's an interesting tradition, Ainu oral lore. Among the indigenous people here, it was known since long ago that a giant master of the lake existed. Ranchers near the lake also reported seeing mysterious large creatures before Kussie became famous. Why didn't the story spread until the 1970s then? Well, because speaking about that monster was taboo. It was feared that misfortune would follow if you talked about it. Each time an earthquake struck Lake Kusharo, people whispered that someone must have broken the taboo by speaking of the creature. Until the mass media picked it up, talk of Kussie did not circulate widely. There were eyewitness reports among the indigenous population. Even before media attention, these were passed down as tradition, as a solid fact. The way it was protected through the 1970s is striking. Perhaps Kussie is not merely a legendary being, but something that actually exists. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, people are still drawn to Nessie. Recently, Loch Ness held a large-scale search, the first in 50 years, using drones and underwater cameras. Even so, no Nessie was found. While in Japan about 50 years ago, a related wave of sightings hit this very lake. In 1973, around 40 junior high school students from Kitami, here on a hiking excursion, reported seeing two humps moving across the surface of Lake Kusharo. That sparked the Kussie boom. Through the 1980s, more witnesses came forward. Some of those interviews went like this. I saw the water move like a motorboat's movement, and it didn't make sense, and then it suddenly did this U-turn. So I said, that's Kussie. And another said, the body was pitch black and it looked quite large. As the story spread across the country, locals formed the Society to Protect Kussie. A giant Kussie monument was even towed by boat across the water. And when they pulled it up onto land, the residents in Yukata circled it and danced Bon Odori. It was a full-scale town revival around Kussie. Tourist numbers reportedly rose by about 200,000 a year, but after the 2000s, the sightings dropped off, and the visitors coming for Kussie fell sharply. Some tourists now say, if it exists, it's a nice dream, but they say there's no Nessie, so what about Kussie? Others admit, I actually don't know what Kussie is. Is that the monument thing over there? Oh, wow, that's cool. Is Kussie already something of the past? There are still people who can speak to the timing of encounters. Kazuma Suzuki, who runs a folk craft shop by the lakeside restaurant, and is also the current chair of the Society to Protect Kussie, said he has seen Kussie twice. 2 humps came up. One in the back was larger, and they moved together, he says. I hurried into a rowboat, but when I got close I couldn't see it anymore. He says he didn't believe it at first, but then, after, he thought, it's real. Both times were before noon. Late morning, he says, is prime time to look. A TV reporter took that tip and started searching. Oh, look, there's something floating. Ah, that's just algae. Oh, look, over there, that. What's that? There's a boat. But the shape is similar to Kussie. But it's a boat. That one looks like Kussie. Oh, hang on a minute, I can see legs. Oh, it's a person. It went like that. The reporter didn't find Kussie. Around Lake Kusharo, you can still run into Kussie in many forms. If you want to take a look at the screen now, I'll show you. There's a Kussie corner in the souvenir shop. Figures and goods all lined up. There's even a Kussie ramen. I would try this. It's a miso-based soup with this Kussie-shaped fish cake floating right there in the middle. If you want to drive the nearby road, you'll see signs for the Kussie Highway. And there's also a Kussie greengrocer, which started under that name about 25 years ago, just by selling corn by the roadside. Across Japan, lakes have their local UMAs, even the major ones. Ashi of Lake Ashi, that's in Kanagawa. Moshi of Lake Mototsu, Yamanashi, seeing a pattern here. And Ishi of Lake Ikeda in Kagoshima. In fact, Ishi and Kussie are sometimes presented as sisters. I don't know why. So why have so many similar unconfirmed creatures been reported in Japan? A scholar of kaiju culture, Professor Kenichi Nakane of Hokkai Gakuen University, who has traveled here twice in search of Kussie, points to Japan's unique pop culture background. In the 1970s, Japan had a monster boom. Children saw kaiju on TV and in movies every day, so monsters felt familiar. As overseas monster stories flowed into Japan, there was also a wish that we can have one here too. Professor Nakane suggests that the monster boom and that wish for local fiction could have given birth to Kussie. So does that mean Kussie was never there from the start? He says that's hard. Proving a negative is difficult. Part of the appeal is pursuing something whose existence is uncertain, and in the same breath, a feeling of, I want to search, but I don't know if I really want it to be found. It's been 50 years since those first reports. Kussie still shows up in many forms around the lake, but more and more visitors don't know the name. But before the memory fades, will there be a day when it appears again? On Amami Oshima, an island between Kyushu and Okinawa, people have long passed down stories about a hairy yokai similar to kappa called Kenmon. It's small like a child, the body is covered in hair, and apparently it smells like a goat. It has a dish on its head, and people say it often tricks humans in the mountains and by the sea. About 10 years ago, Our family for once was getting lively, telling ghost stories. In the middle of that, as if something suddenly came back to him, my second oldest brother started talking in an excited voice. The other day, around evening, I was looking at the back mountain through binoculars I borrowed from a friend. I was kind of scanning the far slope, and on the tip of a branch at the top of a tree, I could see this pitch black person sitting there, and that's definitely a ghost, I swear. They were hugging their knees, but their knees were higher than their head. Right then, Mum and I said it at the same time. That's not a ghost, that's Kenmon. Kenmon, you see, often rests up on treetops in the mountains, and Kenmon often sits hugging its knees, so people used to dislike that posture and call it Kenmon sitting. Kenmon has unnaturally long legs, and when it's hugging its knees, the knees rise higher than the head. So we explained that to my brother, and he kind of went pale and said, "So that was Kenmon? It really does exist?" Kenmon is something you almost never see with the naked eye, but apparently binoculars did the trick, so big bro, that's pretty impressive, I said. My mum told us something she had been taught by my grandpa, who spent many years as a lumberjack. If you ever get lost in the mountains and you absolutely have to spend the night in the dark woods, use a branch or something to draw a wide circle on the ground around yourself, big enough to give you room, and then pray out loud to the mountain god. Listen closely, this may well save your life. Mountain god, for such and such reasons, I must ask to stay one night on this mountain. Please, for this one night, let me remain here without harm. Lend me this patch of land for just one night. While I am within this circle, please protect me from all misfortune. Well, if you do that, Kenmon and the beasts of the wild will circle around the edge of the line all night, but they will never be able to enter the circle, because that is the promise you just made with the mountain god. So when you go up and when you go down, don't forget to greet the mountain god and give thanks, because the mountain god is always watching closely. There are things out in the wild we don't understand, and the strange part, different places tell almost the same stories. Hi, Jay here. Stay with me, 2 first-hand accounts from rural Japan, and I'll try and land on a conclusion by the end. If you've ever heard of kagemono, the shadow things said to live in the mountains of Japan, or the worldwide Glimmer Man reports, keep those in the back of your mind while we go. This is something I experienced when I was a kid. Every summer vacation, we went back to my mother's family home, far from the city, full of nature. I looked forward to it every year. There was one thing I enjoyed most: bug collecting. They lived deep in the mountains, so at night, the few streetlights along the road pulled in a huge number of insects. Just walking the road, you could pick up all the good stuff that little boys love. Rhinoceros beetles, diving beetles, praying mantis, that kind of thing. Like every other year, that year too, I headed out with my dad onto the country road after dark. The bug road, as I called it, splits into 2 and then merges back into 1 part way along. We always split up and we worked separately. It was more efficient. That night was no different. By this time there weren't any beetles at all. Even the moths and cicadas that were usually everywhere were missing. Thinking that it was strange, I kept going until I reached the middle stretch of the road, and then I saw something odd standing in the middle. I got closer and figured out what it was. A mass of insects. Everything from the big ones like the rhinoceros beetles to mantises, butterflies, every kind of insect you can think of, piled up, swarming around something. Looking closely, that something had a human shape, but it was way too big. That wasn't the size of a normal person. I remember a giant, about 3 meters tall, nearly 10 foot, its body covered in black, coarse hair. I was completely scared, but I couldn't just ignore the swarming treasure pile, so I ran to the rendezvous point to get my dad. I told him what I'd seen, and we went back to where the giant had been, but there was nothing there anymore. Not a single insect left, even though there had been a ton of them just before. My dad laughed it off. I didn't catch a single bug, and the whole night was a bust. But what on earth was that giant? This is a story I heard from a friend in the countryside. His family grows shiitake mushrooms in the mountains. Because the logs sometimes get messed with or stolen, he goes up to check on things now and then. One time while doing the usual round, he spotted a moving shadow beyond the trees. He was sure it was a person. Maybe they were wearing camouflage. He couldn't make out anything clearly, so he thought, must be some people up here playing airsoft or something. Excuse me, this is private property. Please don't play here. He shouted it out loud, and then the shadow started walking towards him. With the sound of crushed leaves and soil, it came closer, but he still couldn't make out any outline or face. And just like that, the sound and the shadow passed right next to him and went off somewhere. When he told me about this experience, he wrapped things up by saying, "In the end." I still don't know what that was. I even asked my dad and my grandpa, and all they said was, "There are weird things in the mountains," and that's it. That's what he said, tilting his head. Hi, Jay here. So what did they run into? For the first story, a 3-meter person covered in black hair with insects all over it. There are a couple of grounded notes that actually make this scene kind of creepier. Those streetlights they mentioned in the mountains, they act like bug magnets. Anything standing dead center in that light's cone, a tree, a pole, a person, would get covered. An odor draws in insects as well. Sweat, animal musk, even fermenting tree sap on fur. If something big was standing there for a while, it would look like a living hive. But that doesn't answer everything. It still leaves the size and the hair. In Japan, that puts you close to the family of mountain beings people talk about under different names. Yamabito, mountain people, or sometimes known as Yama Otoko, or modern-day wild man legends. Or could it be a yokai? Nyudo are types of yokai said to appear too tall at night, but this witness stressed a hairy body, not a trick of perspective. So I don't know what it was. For the second story, the moving shadow with real footsteps that pass by, this is where the kagemono idea fits. In rural talk, kagemono is a catch-all for shadow beings in the hills. You hear the weight and pace, but the outline refuses to settle. It's not a see-through ghost. It's like a presence that occupies space, while somehow being able to dodge the eye. That matches the friend's experience as well. Clear footfalls, no face, no edge, and then it's gone. If you zoom out beyond Japan, this shape problem shows up in other places too. People describe a predator-style camouflage, the so-called glimmer man. Something that bends the background so the body looks like heat haze. The same core complaint. You hear the mass, you feel watched, but the image won't lock. Different label, same pattern. So here's what I think. For the first one, it could be a wild human encounter, framed by streetlight and the swarm of insects, a physical something that stood there long enough to become a tower of insects. Whatever it is, I don't like that one, it sounds big. And the second one, case 2, reads like a kagemono pass-by. Audible, spatial, but visually resistant. The exact same kind of thing people all over the world point to when they say glimmer man. But hey, you can just take some comfort, I guess, knowing that we may not be alone in the mountains. The other day I wrote about a slightly scary memory from my grade school years called Beyond the Frosted Glass. There's one more thing that came back to me, so I want to write it down before I forget. I moved 3 times during elementary school. In that previous piece I wrote about the second house. This time, it's another story from that same house. It was a 2-story detached place with a garden, basically a rental. At one point, we started saying that the floor in my parents' bedroom felt like it was sinking. When you walked on it, the floor gave way underfoot. We figured that the floorboards must be rotten. So the tatami were lifted, and a carpenter came to check. As suspected, the boards were bad. So we decided to have the floorboards replaced. I was at school, so I didn't see what was done during the work, but I was honestly shocked when I got home. I stepped inside, looked into the bedroom, and there it was, a room with no floor. Just wooden beams, joists, and below them. This is really how it was. Normally, you'd think when you take up floorboards on the ground floor, you'd see earth under the house, right? But instead it was gouged out in this big hollow, like a cave-in. The soil was black and damp, and at the bottom there was black water pooled. It was a bizarre sight. The smell was awful too, like a storm drain or rotten eggs. In other words, a hydrogen sulfide kind of smell. The depth wasn't quite 2 meters, but it was carved down pretty deep, and the hollow spread out under the entire floor. You don't often get to see something like that from inside a house. And even back then, I was leaning over peering down with a lot of curiosity. And that's when my mother came over and said, Oh, when they pulled up the floorboards, there was this huge bug, like this. It was so disgusting. She showed the size with her hands. It was roughly about 30 centimeters. I asked what kind of insect it was, and she said the body was silver, shaped like a shimi. Hi, Jay here. Some people may not be familiar with shimi. In kanji, it's literally paper fish, and it's a silverfish in English. A flat, shrimpish-looking insect, known as the enemy of books. You know how with old books sometimes you have to air them out in the sun once a year. You might find a bug like that just scurrying around in them, or hiding in your carpets. Anyway, back to the story. But a shimi, or a silverfish, only gets to be about 1 centimeter long at most. This one was said to be around 30 centimeters. So if you want to imagine that, think of the silverfish that appears in Minecraft if you have that frame of reference. According to my mother, the moment it was noticed, it darted away into the hole in the ground, and it never appeared again. I don't think a bug like that really exists in Japan at all. Could this be some kind of UMA? A cryptid? Well, thinking about it now, it could have been my mother playing a little prank on a kid, telling a story like that. But she wasn't that kind of person who came up with clever pranks on a daily basis, so this still feels slightly strange to me, even now. I should have asked my mother before she passed away whether that shimmy story was really true. It bothers me now, too late as it is, and it still leaves me hazy about that time. On the roads that run under Mount Hiba, the ridges that look down on Shobara, in the early 1970s, people here started talking about a mysterious ape that didn't fit anything they knew. They gave it a name from the mountain itself, Hibagon. The first reports that stuck came July 20th, 1970, in the Yuki area of then Saijo town, at the foothills of Mount Hiba. a driver saw something cross near the dam road, too big to be a monkey. In the weeks that followed, more witnesses spoke up. The description repeated enough to feel rehearsed. It was apparently 5 foot tall, 1.6 meters, and it had a triangular face, a gorilla-like build. News crews came, people shut doors earlier, parents kept kids inside. The word locals used wasn't pet or boar, it was definitely ape. By the end of that summer, the town office had created a real ape desk to handle tips and map sightings as they started to circulate. Little dots creeping along the roads that cut between hamlets and cedar stands. The mood was half fear, half curiosity. Every night's broadcast drew in a crowd. Over the next few years, the reports clustered, then thinned. In December 1970, people even talked about tracks in the snow near Mount Azuma. After a quiet stretch, 1974 lit up again with roadside encounters. One driver said that his headlights lit up the hairy 1.6 meter ape-like creature, startling it. It then turned and disappeared into the trees. A woman in Hiwa later said the thing she saw standing on the prefectural road looked like a very large, old monkey, right down to the gate. By October 1974, the official pile of reports sat at about 29, and then it went quiet. But today you can still walk through Saijo and run into Hibagon. Mascots though, signs, sweets named for it, and even exhibits and summer talk events that pull the story back into light. The creature never turned into evidence, but it did turn into part of the town's identity. So what is it? The safe answers came early. Macaque or bear, just seen wrong. A boar in bad light maybe. Someone off trail in heavy clothing. The bolder answers said, a transient ape, an unknown wild man. In the summer of 1974, one eyewitness flatly called it a big old monkey. Others pushed back saying what they saw wasn't any monkey that they knew. That spread. Same valley, different conclusions is what made it stick. Half a century on, people here still swap this story. Officially, the paper trail ends in 1974 though, but unofficially, there's always one more walk home where the trees feel closer than they should, a rumor of steps that cut out when you stop, and a memory of an outline that didn't quite match the animals you grew up with. Whether Hibagon was a misread macaque or something we may never pin down, the night on the mountain still carries the weight of maybe, just maybe. It was a weekday evening after work. The last local put me at the station a little late, and the bus line was suspended. A landslip had taken out one lane of the mountain road. I had my commuter bike with me, but the detour was a narrow ridge path, too rough to ride, so I walked the bike, left hand on the bars, right hand on the saddle, headlamps strapped on from my pack, cedars on both sides, dirt no wider than a couple of steps. A quarter of the way up, another rhythm settled behind mine. Not boots, pads, even spacing. My headlight only lit up enough to see trunks and brush ahead of me. The bike's tires ticked over roots. The steps behind me matched the pace. The rhythm wasn't human. Pad pad, a breath, pad pad. 4 feet, not 2. It tugged at a loose thread in my memory, and my grandmother's ridge path rule came up exactly as she said it. If 4 feet pace you at night, don't look back. If you slip, say, Chotto, hitoyasumi sasete kudasai. Just let me rest a little moment. The thing that walks travelers after dark. That's Okuri Inu, or Okuri Okami in some places. Keep the etiquette, and it sees you home. Ignore it, and it finishes what the fall starts, closing in the distance while you're off balance, and pulling you off the trail where the cedars swallow sound. If you have something to eat, leave a little bit of it, and keep moving. They say that might spare you. The slope steepened after the first bend. Leaf mold made a slick skin over roots and stones. The air came clean and cold off of the river, with that sour cedar note you mostly notice at dusk. The pads kept time with me, never rushing, never dragging. Just there, but not quite my tempo. At a small wayside shrine, I stopped. I leaned the bike against the rail, bowed and set down 2 skewers of dango. I bought them by the station. They came in a paper tray, which had turned sticky, sweet soy cutting through the wet wood. For the road, I said. More to the notice board than anything else. The footfalls paused while I did it, like whatever was trailing me didn't want to walk in on the offering. Past the shrine, the path pinched to one careful line around a washout on the ridge path. I kept the stride short and neat, guiding the front wheel with my hip. Every so often, a soft huff came behind me. The interested sound a dog makes when it's paying attention. No growl, no brush crash, just a body in the same lane, breathing. A root lifted out of the dirt like a handle, and I caught my toe on it. I dropped to a knee. Grit in my palm, the bike chattering once against the rail. Reflex pushed me to look back, but I didn't. I set it steady, the way my grandmother taught it. Chotto, hitoyasumi sasete kudasai. Just let me rest a moment. Everything held off for half a breath. Bugs, wind, my own pulse, then one slow sniff by my left shoulder. The air shifted to wet fur and a faint iron heat, kind of like a dog that perhaps dried out too close to a kerosene stove. I set one skewer on a flat rock beside the track. For you. I then stood, brushed my hands, picked my bike up, and walked on. The path started again, but stayed farther back, as if we'd agreed on the distance. When the path curved, the sound slid to the outside of the bend, and then eased to the center again. It never crowded my heels. I kept my eyes in the beam and let the moths, bark, and wet stones tell me where I was. People up here describe Okuri Inu in plain terms. Not a village dog. It's about wolf size, and it has long legs, a bristled back, a low tail, and its ears are up. Its coat is a dark brown grey, like wet bark, so it blends into the trees, and its eyes don't shine by themselves, but they reflect light. The tracks look like a big dog's when it's moving smoothly, and the back feet land almost in the front prints. That's what the ones who've looked over their shoulders say. I didn't risk it though, but on the inside of one of those zigzagging turns, the headlamp caught a shallow puddle. The surface shook in a small wind, and for a second, a shape moved in the reflection. A long head, carried low, ears forward, something large stepping in a careful line. The puddle trembled again, and the image broke. I kept walking. The final descent into the village is where the river noise widens, and the air trades cedar for cooking smoke. Right there, the padding stopped. Not a scramble, just a clean end, like it had reached a line it didn't dare cross. I followed the guardrail with my light, and a porch lamp blinked on somewhere down the slope. Only under the street lamp did I turn. The ridge path was a dark stitch up the hill. The trees held still, nothing moved. I wheeled the bike back through the last lanes and went home. I slept lightly at home and went back up first light to check the washout on the ridge path. The paper tray on the shrine rock was empty. Only one skewer lay in the dirt with tooth marks in the soft wood, pressed and released, the way a trained dog takes something without splitting it. No prints close by. The night's damp and cedar needles had wiped the board clean. But between the shrine and the tight zigzag path, I found 3 clear ovals in a softer patch. Big toe pads, no heel, all pointing the way I'd been going. Not boar, not human, just the tidy marks of a heavy animal that walks straight. When I told my grandmother, she didn't fuss. "It walked you home," she said. "That's what it does when you mind your manners." She asked if I looked back, and I said no. She nodded and told me to leave something again that evening. So I set another skewer on the same rock before dark and bowed once. I didn't ask for anything. Last night hadn't felt like protection so much as being watched to see if I'd follow the rules. On the way back after dusk, the ridge was ordinary. A few insects were chirping away. A truck changed its gears on the far road. I walked the rest of the way with no steps behind me. The path felt normal again, and I guess whatever had walked with me, the yokai they call Okuri Inu, had moved on.